even from a young age, I wanted to be bold and I wanted to be the one that was kind of like selectively obedient, maybe.
I'm Hannah Octavia, a 20-something exploring the question, how do people really figure out their careers, their goals, and their lives? This is a podcast about stories worth sharing, the wins, the setbacks, and everything in between. My hopes is that each episode leaves you inspired, motivated, and reminded that every story is different, and that's what makes it beautiful. Today on the podcast, I'm speaking with Charlie Follows, a YouTube yogi who's built a community of over 1 million people. After teaching a minimum of 18 classes per week in person, she realized that path wasn't sustainable and began the shift to building an online platform. In this episode, we talk about creating a life on your own terms and what it really takes to build something that lasts. I am so very excited for this conversation today. I have been following you and your yoga channel for probably about 10 months now, and my yoga practice has gotten exponentially better, I must say. And it's like really gotten me excited, and I feel like stronger and more confident, and I can like do things like baby grasshopper now, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting.
I love that. I love that. That's what it's all about. That's what I'm here to do. I'm definitely not here to be the gently, softly yoga teacher. I'm here to guide you in a gentle way, but also to push you to do the things that you didn't realize that you could do.
I would love you to introduce yourself to our lovely listeners today. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Okay. Hello. I am Charlie Follows, most known for being a yoga teacher on YouTube. I also have a program community online where I teach people how to do things that they didn't realize they could, people of any age and at any ability. I also most recently moved into becoming a teacher of teachers, but not a teacher of teachers who teaches people how to teach yoga. I teach people the business side behind teaching, because over the years I've had to teach myself and collect so much information, never really had any mentorship, and I realized this was such a gap in the yoga world, and who better to learn from than someone who's literally been there and done it and knows your world, so that you're not learning from a business coach who can't really apply it to the yoga world, but you're learning from a yoga teacher who is also a business coach. So that is now the new phase of my life and my business that I'm in.
Amazing. And when did you start that kind of side of things, the teaching side? Teaching of teachers, I suppose.
It happened probably about 1.5 years ago, very like off the bat. I got a request from someone and they were like, hey, would you mind looking at my YouTube channel? Would you mind giving me some feedback? Would you do a consultation? I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I've never been asked that before. I didn't even know what to charge, you know? And then that led into me thinking, okay, people are genuinely curious to learn. What if I packaged this, started offering one-to-ones? Then beginning of last year, I started taking it really seriously. And I was like, I really want to create some courses. I really want to take everything that's in my brain, everything that I have learned, all of my experiential knowledge, package it in a way that can genuinely help people. And that's now where I'm up to at this point. But right now, I think, you have to focus on what is right for right now and grow at like a comfortable rate rather than try and just go too big too soon.
100%. Do you think you've always had that mentality of being able to stay in the present, in the now, and not run away with the idea?
Oof, absolutely not. I'm such a fiery person. I want to do everything now. So I have learned through managing myself, as every business owner does, that I recognize that about myself. So I'm always reining myself in, where I'm like, whoa, you're getting ahead of yourself here. And it's not always easy to spot yourself doing that. Normally it's after the fact, when you're looking back in retrospect and you're like, oh, now I can connect the dots and I see how I've ended up in this chaotic mess. And you repeat that so many times and then you learn from it. So now I'm definitely in the phase of my business where I know how I operate and I know that I need to rein myself in, which is why I now have the understanding that everything has a certain amount of time that it's going to take, and I have to accept that that's the natural progression of things, that I can't speed run to the end where I'm looking to get to.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you are speaking my language. I think this past, 2026, the past few months has really been a practice in me putting my energy into very specific things. I think prior to this year, I was all like, I'm going to do everything and then something's going to hit. But now I kind of look at it as, if I do few things well and put a lot of energy into those few things, then my skills are going to improve. Hopefully people will watch, and hopefully they'll get some traction from that. Because if I spread I just find my brain is so full of everything all at once, and it's really hard to stay in the moment when you get and clearly this is your passion, this is my passion, and it's like, it's hard to stop yourself sometimes. And I find, even at the moment I am living with my parents, I just moved back from England. Life is all very chaotic at the moment. And my dad's like, well, why didn't you have dinner with us last night? And I'm like, I literally get so into what I'm doing that I can't even hear what's happening outside. Like the hours just speed by, and I'm like, whoa, I just worked a full day, but now I'm doing this for another full day. And it's like a weird thing to control of yourself. Have you found that?
For sure. I'm 29 now. I turn 30 in a few weeks' time, and I have been reflecting a lot on how I've operated through my 20s. I have just been in work mode for all of my 20s. I've been the person that said no to plans. I've been the person that, didn't really prioritize anything other than work. I'm very happy I did that, because now I have, a comfortable lifestyle, and I have the foundations for something that I always wanted. But I relate to that 100%. You have to just put the blinkers on and just have tunnel vision, I think, if you're going to build anything of substance, because you can't be here, there, and everywhere. It ends up being too scattered. Like you say, you end up doing too many things, and none of them to any degree of excellence. Everything's just kind of mediocre or good, but it's not really good enough, because you're trying to, spin too many plates at once.
Exactly. And you need to have that excellence in order to kind of, break through all the noise. Yeah. In the podcast world, in the YouTube world, there's so much competition. And, you've gotten to a place now where your community is, in the millions, which is such a beautiful place to be. Do you ever find that you're still comparing yourself to other creators, even though you've reached this stage?
There's a couple of things. Yes, that doesn't stop. It doesn't matter what level you are at. I don't know whether it's quite comparison or whether it's a way to gauge, am I where I'm supposed to be at? So you compare, not to say am I better, am I worse, but am I in the right place? So it's kind of different. But also I think you get to a point where, and the million was definitely that for me, where I just stopped looking at certain numbers, because I just thought it's not healthy for me to count those things anymore. Let me look at other signals of success, rather than is this number bigger than it was last month? Because that's not always helpful. And if that number goes down, it does so much to your confidence. When you are the face of everything that you're putting out there, those numbers can speak volumes in terms of your relationship with yourself. They have such a strong impact. So you really have to distance yourself from certain things, because comparison can be very helpful or it can be detrimental. So it's just about picking your battles with that one, I think.
Yes, I would agree. And if you recall, when you did hit that, 1 million, you get the YouTube subscriber plaque, from an observer perspective, and I'm sure that you've experienced yourself, I think we view hitting 1 million on YouTube as this huge achievement, as this thing that, check mark, you've gotten your success, you are this thing to idolize, you must feel so accomplished How did you feel actually when you got that?
Honestly, the plaque that you get, the silver plaque for 100, was more special to me. It really was. Because by the time I'd got to the million, I felt like there was a lot more pressure, a lot more expectation. All of a sudden, people were messaging me like, I hope nothing's going to change. So the million was kind of tainted, as if like I was going to become this different person because now there was a bigger number next to my name on YouTube. So it was almost like I couldn't enjoy it the same, because people want you to grow, but then they don't want you to get too big, because then when you get too big, they start saying, oh, this is different. This isn't the way it was, even though we all go through different seasons in our life. Of course, I'm going to change. I'm going to get older. I'm going to change the way I see the world. I'm going to change the things that I want to put out there. So there will be that change, but people will attribute it differently. And they will say, oh, that's because you got too big. Or, oh, that's because now you've got this, this, and this. So that is why for me, the million was kind of tainted, where incredible, but it perhaps wasn't what people thought it was to me.
I like that frame of reference. And I think it is funny when you see, just from like a viewer perspective and scrolling through people's comments, or even listening to different YouTubers speak, it's like they always get subject to like, you've changed. And it's like, you realize these are humans. Like every
Of course I've changed.
Like, I don't understand.
I'm a woman. I have hormones.
It boggles my mind. Like, I was thinking the other day, I reconnected with a friend from high school, and I graduated 10 years ago. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, it's fabulous that I can have this relationship again. But then I was like, what if I had never changed from high school? Like, that is a horrifying reality if that's the case. So it just boggles my mind that people don't understand the concept that you will evolve as a person, and that the person that you're going to be consuming information from is going to evolve. Like, you can't be the same person your entire life. Like, imagine the boredom of that. Oh,
exactly. Where's the self-development in that if we were all just to stay the same? And the thing that gets me as well, and this is an insight that not many people are privy to, is that you cannot imagine how much receiving that many comments about the work that you're producing, or about you, or, about this or that, this opinion, that way of framing something, that will affect you over time. And people just assume that it just bounces off you. But of course, you're going to internalize some of that. You're probably going to let some of it just roll off your back, and it's not going to affect you. But this is another side that people don't see. And as I'm having this conversation, I'm realizing there is scope there to talk about this more, so people understand the people that you are engaging with daily are people. They are not above this. You don't go through any media training when you become a YouTuber. Like, you have to figure it out along the way. And I always respect the people who just seem so unbothered by it. Maybe they are, maybe they're just really good at acting like they're not. But I love the people who are so unserious about it, because I care deeply, and I feel like I almost let myself care too much about it. So, I'm always considering, how does this affect this? And it's harder in that way. And I think that's probably why getting to the million for me was different than what people expected. And every time I get one of those comments where people are like, oh, you've changed, please don't say that, because I'm going to lose sleep over it. Like, I'm the type of person that will. So just please don't.
It's like, keep that comment to yourself. Don't press send. Oh, what an interesting concept. And I think, because as I was, doing my research on you, there's not much about you online, like about who you are personally. I'm assuming it's purposeful. Yes. And of course, I suppose this can be a nice transition into your childhood, because one of the most searchable things about you, Charlie, is Charlie follows accent. So that is like the number one search, because I too, when I started watching, I was like, is she British? Is she Australian? Is she Canadian? Like, I'm not quite sure where it's coming from. So please tell us, where did you grow up? What was your childhood like? bring us through your early days.
Wow. So I'm not surprised that is the most common search because I get it all the time, and I understand that I have a very mixed accent with some different twangs, with lots of different influences. I grew up in Staffordshire in Stoke-on-Trent in the Midlands in the United Kingdom. I've spent the majority of my life here. I don't know why my accent sounds so varied. I think some of it's from like moving school when I was younger and really wanting to fit in. I was like the posh girl who moved to a state school and then just desperately wanted to fit in. So kind of toned down my T's and started shortening my words. So I sounded like all of the other kids in the class because I was like, please, I just don't want to be the center of attention. Just let me blend. So it was a little bit of that. Then, you know, having friends who are from other countries, traveling, you all tend to blend with one another. I think I definitely have that type of whether it's like a personality trait where I try to mirror whoever I'm with to make them feel more comfortable, to make them feel more accepted, I guess. So perhaps it's part of that. But then also as you are on camera so much, you really start to think about how can I make this sound clearer? How can I tone down some of the things that are more regional to make myself be understood universally, especially when you're considering an audience where English isn't their first language. I'm always thinking, how can I make this really clear? Because I understand that the less friction involved in like hearing my cues means people are going to have an easier time, means, you know, better video retention, happy days for everybody. So it was never as calculated in the early days, but now I think I am very intentional sometimes about the way that I speak. Just the same way, you know, a musician might try and control their voice to protect their vocal cords. I will consider how I can pronounce something to be better understood by different audiences.
You found a way to, you know, utilize the things that you are strong at and also really consider your audience, because I think that's something that I don't necessarily always do, is I kind of forget about the audience and I just hope I cross my fingers that someone will find me. And that's kind of how I go about it.
I think, you know, for me, it was the same in the beginning. And then as you get a little bit more strategic with your content creation, you think about it more. And then it's like, oh, she has this master plan. But really in the beginning, it was very much like I was doing exactly what you were doing. Like, let me just put myself out there, see if it's received well, because I didn't want to change myself too much. But then there is also an element of like, actually, well, no, this is an improvement. It's not a change. It's not me being less of myself. It's actually just me revealing a side of myself that is better suited to this role that I'm playing on camera, or this job role that I'm stepping into, whatever it may be, because the way I am in a yoga class is going to be different to the way that I'm going to show up in a conversation like this. You know, we all do it. We all change ourselves depending on what's asked of us, depending on, you know, how we need to show up.
I really, really like that perspective, actually. I'm gonna take that, and yeah, I'm gonna keep that one locked away, because that's a really good way to look at it. It's like, I'm not changing myself. You're just developing a certain area of yourself, which I think is a positive way to look at it. Now, tell me, your family dynamic as a child. Do you have siblings, parents? Walk me through it all.
No, it's just me, my mom, my dad. So as a child, I remember having like a really quiet childhood, I guess, but because I was an only child, I was always finding ways to entertain myself, had loads of hobbies. You know, my mom was always getting me to do things with friends. And it just made me super independent. And I don't, you know, begrudge it or anything. I would have loved to have had a sibling. I definitely envy people who have siblings sometimes for that connection. But I realized it also almost gave me this superpower where I am so comfortable in my own company. I'm so easily entertained. Like, I will just go and do things with myself. I don't really need the support of other people for that. So, you know, swings and roundabouts. But I grew up with both my parents together. They're still together, bless them. They're going strong. My dad has his own business, so I think he has definitely been one of my biggest influences in life in terms of what's possible. Like growing up and seeing him do big things made me realize I could do big things. And I was just having a conversation with a friend this morning about how if you don't see that and you don't grow up with that, you definitely grow up with this limiting belief that like only so much is possible based on what you've seen your parents do or what like your immediate circle of people are doing. And because I grew up with a dad who was doing things that at the time I was like, I have no idea what he's doing, but he's doing them. And I was seeing him do these things. And growing up, it definitely allowed me to take risks, to make riskier decisions, you know, because he would just be like, go for it. And having that influence in your life is so important, I think, if you're going to run a business, if you're going to, you know, do anything that goes against the common grain.
When you were growing up, only child, did you, like, what was your relationship like with your parents? Do you think you matured faster? Do you think you were, like, what was the kind of dynamic?
I don't think I matured faster. I think I matured at the same rate as everybody else, and then I got to my teens and I was super rebellious because I always
were you
yeah this is a side of me people don't expect because they think yoga teacher goody two shoes, but no, from the age of like 13 till maybe like 19, 20, I was very much like off the rails. I hated being told what to do. I think this is also like the entrepreneurial streak that you can see in people from an early age. If you don't like being told what to do and you've got a bit of drive, a bit of fire in your belly, maybe pursue opening a business, you know, like it might be the best thing that you can channel that energy into, because you're going to be in a position where you are now calling the shots, which I think ultimately was what I wanted from a young age. I hated the schooling system, was not academic by school standards, although I do not think that I'm stupid. I think that I have intelligence. It might not be in the same form as other people, but I also think some of the most talented entrepreneurs are not intelligent by school standards. So growing up through the schooling system, I think that definitely suppressed me in some ways. Like I definitely grew up with that feeling of, oh, I won't be able to do much because I'm not great at maths, or I struggle remembering things. And it wasn't until I got out of the schooling system that I realized actually there's so much that I can make if I have the drive and the determination and the perseverance to stick with it. And now I look at it and I'm like, I'm so glad that I went my own way and that I didn't go down the route of being I don't even know, like a corporate girl climbing the ladder, because that was never gonna be me. But no, that's my biggest sort of takeaway from growing up, is this feeling of I don't want to do what everybody else is doing. And when you're in that schooling system, it just came across as like rebellion, like I was just naughty. And that wasn't the case. I wasn't a bad child. I was just, I just didn't want to follow what everybody else was following. And to be honest, I didn't see the point in it. Why am I spending a year learning about Henry VIII's wives? Why am I ever going to need to know about that? At what point is that going to help me? And even now I stand by that, where I think a lot of the schooling system is just irrelevant to life skills. And if I ever had kids, I'd probably want to homeschool them, or I don't know, just seek out a better education for them, because my experience in the education system was that a lot of it's just redundant information and it's just filling the time.
That's the number one thing that I hear is like, well, how is this relevant for the future? And I always have to twist it into, you know, well, it's teaching you life skills. Like, it's not about learning about Henry VIII, for example. It's like teaching the life skills of how to learn about Henry VIII, because you have to like try to make it so people will pay attention. Yeah. It's hard when you see like kids these days and the skills that they need for the future, and it's just not happening. It's hard, and it's a whole other conversation that I could go deep into and probably get myself into trouble, so I'll stop now. But anyways, back to your schooling. So you said you were classified as the naughty child because you didn't want to follow what everyone else was doing. Did that then result in poor grades? What was kind of the consequence of that?
Not always, no. I remember one funny parents' evening. I don't know if you call it parents' evening in Canada.
Yes.
So your parents go in, the teachers talk to them about your performance, etc. And I remember my mom going to visit my geography teacher. This is in high school. And she was talking about how I was always asleep in class, how I was always like having my head on the desk, just having a little nap in class. And then I came out of my GCSEs and I got a B. And I remember I was always looked down on by the kids in that class. There was like different sets, and a lot of the smarter kids in the top set were in the same class as me. And I remember, I think they just kind of cancelled me out as like this burnout that was never going to go anywhere. And I was like, look at me with my B, even though I slept the whole year through geography. So not necessarily. I'm a great writer. I am not good at maths. I was good at art. So it was very, up and down across the board. But, I scraped by. I also grew up with a father who was like, this doesn't matter. My dad was never academic and managed to build a business that still thrives to this day. So I grew up with that influence, knowing if this doesn't go the way that the teachers are wanting it to go, that's not the end of the world, because this is a blip. So for that reason, I also didn't really take it that seriously, because I was like, you're telling me this is really important. I know this isn't really important because I've got somebody at home telling me otherwise, and I'm probably going to trust him more than I trust you. So that was my schooling experience summarized.
I wonder what it would have been like to be your teacher. I'm just so surprised by this because I don't know. I guess this is me. I have to check myself. We can't assume people. We can't assume that I know exactly who you are just by how you present yourself today.
No.
So when you were younger, you always kind of had this interest in the entrepreneurial side of things with your father as inspiration. What would have been your dream as a child that you wanted to do when you were older?
There was never one thing. I just always wanted to be a badass. Like, that sounds so funny to say out loud. But I remember growing up watching like Charlie's Angels, watching like heists and superheroes and spy films, and being like, I want to be that person that's like debonair, that's a wordsmith, that is just so suave. Like, that's what I'm aiming for. Whatever job title that comes with, like, sign me up, I'll do that one.
That's hilarious.
Because there was never like, I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer. That none of those standard job roles that we're so familiar with ever really called to me. But that really did, probably because I was like so rebellious, and I was like, let me just do the thing that like no one expects.
Yep. That's hilarious. That's so funny. And I suppose we'll talk about your picture actually before I completely move on. So perhaps you could give us a little bit of detail. And actually, I'm going to insert a new question that I learned about. So I interviewed this lady last week. Not lady, this woman. Lady sounds weird. She was 29. She is 29. She's not like, anyways. Hannah, reel it in. I interviewed someone last week, and they had a really interesting perspective on the whole childhood picture. So you can either just answer what's happening in the picture, or tell me how this photo makes you feel.
Oh, I could tell you both. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, tell me both.
Obviously, growing up as an only child, I didn't have siblings. I spent years begging my parents if we could get a dog. My mom had grown up with loads of pets. My dad had grown up with dogs, and I'd never had that. So when I was about 11, I think in this photo, I finally, after about 6 months of me torturing them in every creative way that I could think of, I finally convinced them to get a dog. And this photo is the day that we went to select the dog from a breeder in Birmingham. So a Welsh Terrier breeder. It was just a family, and they had two. They'd had puppies, so we got to go and pick them. And the best day. Like, this photo makes me so happy because I just remember being surrounded by these puppies and they're jumping all over it. They didn't know why we were there, but like they were just really cute. And we picked Archie. He's the one I'm holding in the photo. He was the rowdiest one. He was the one like standing on all of the other ones, like kind of like the biggest, the boldest character. And I was like, that's the dog for me. And he stayed true to character like the whole way through his life. He was just so selectively obedient, would only really give you the time of day when he wanted to. Like, he was definitely calling the shots, and I just loved him for that, because he was never going to be the most obedient, but he was definitely going to be the one with the most character. So I love this photo because it's a happy time, and it's also like, I love that saying about how your dog says a lot about the owner. Sometimes it's just like the way the dog looks, but sometimes I think it's the way the dog acts. And I think we're very much drawn, like calls to like, and he definitely called to me in that way, that like even from a young age, I wanted to be bold, and I wanted to be the one that was kind of like selectively obedient, maybe.
I love that.
So yeah, I think it says a lot about me, even though I didn't realize it at the time. But it's funny when you connect the dots back like that through your life, isn't it?
It is funny. I know it's funny reflecting on all the things. And I'm going to jump forward just a little bit because, as you mentioned, that you're turning 30. So with 30, I suspect comes with a lot of reflection. Is there maybe kind of a key thing that you look back at your life and think you've learned so far?
Yeah, it's hit me like a train wreck the last couple of months. I'm like, where did this come from? Not necessarily in a bad way, in more you start to question things in a way that you perhaps haven't. I think for a lot of your life, you're just going. And then 30 kind of feels like that chance to pause, to reassess. I also remember at the start of the year seeing this meme, and it was like, you're going to hit 30 and you're going to want to tear your life apart and start again. And I genuinely have been considering this recently. I was like, do I relocate? Do I just like go crazy and go travel the world? Like, what do I need? And then I was like, whoa, rein it in. But I think one thing that has definitely been the theme at the moment is almost like this coming into yourself, this understanding of yourself that is so much clearer the closer you get to 30, and probably only continues to get clearer, that picture that you're forming of yourself, that identity, that when you're young, it's just not there yet. I think some people, they definitely get it at an earlier age. But for me, it took a while, and now I'm very sure of myself. I know what's for me. I know what isn't for me. I'm also at a point where I'm happy to say no to things, because previous versions of me would have found that exciting or would have thought that was a good idea, but present day me knows that's not a good idea for me. That's not really ultimately what I want. And it's that confidence and conviction in your decision making, in your thought processes, that comes with, being 30. Well, or at least it is for me at the moment. So that's why bring on 30s. I'm excited.
Bring on 30s. You should be excited. My my fiance just turned 30, and I think he had a little bit of he probably has a little bit of a conundrum with it, just kind of thinking about where you are in life, where society thinks you should be in life, and all these like pressures. And I think it's funny, like we've been together for many, many years now, and just thinking back to who he was when I first met him at 19, I'm like, oh my God, you have become a 1 million times better person than when I first met you. Like, it's just so, and I'm not sure if he can recognize that himself, but like, it's something that I recognize in him. Do you find that, obviously you're at a point now that you can recognize this growth in yourself, but do you think other people around you has recognized it maybe before?
Possibly, yeah. I think it's like a shifting of priorities as well that people tend to recognize. Like lately, my priority, as I mentioned, in my 20s, I spent most of it working. So I definitely didn't prioritize relationships as much as I should have. And now I really am. And like my friends will say to me, oh my gosh, it's so nice to have you here more, doing more things and reaching out more. So I think there's definitely that. And with that, there will be some changes as well that they might not notice yet, but it'll be really interesting to see. But I just wanted to ask you before the conversation moves ahead, the lady that you spoke with, or the woman that you spoke with, who had the interesting reframe about the childhood photo, what was it?
So she is a dietitian, and listeners, by the time this goes live, this episode with Nicole Addison will already be live. So please do go check it out. But she was speaking about, it was a picture of her eating buttered noodles as a child, because that was the only thing that she ate. And it's funny now because she is a dietitian and a nutritionist, and her diet is so varied now. But she looks back at that picture, and rather than, telling me what was happening outside of the picture, the first thing she mentioned was like how happy she looked and how free she was. A lot of her journey to becoming who she is today was going through the process of like having challenges with food and kind of, being very restrictive. And that's something that we related on in many ways. And she just saw the picture and was like, that's when I was completely free. Like there was nothing about me that had this like subconscious thing about when I was eating. It was simply, this is the thing that made me happy. This is what I chose. And this is how I remember that time. And it was just a really beautiful way to kind of, rather than saying, oh, this picture was taken in Mexico and I was eating butter pasta and I was such a picky eater. It was like putting this like, I don't know, like a continual lesson around it in a sense.
Yeah. That was really beautiful. I'm so glad I asked the question now, because I think that's one of the things we always look back to when we were a child, when there was no negative beliefs, there was no story that we were telling ourselves, there was no expectation. It was just, you get to be a kid and you just get to exist, and it doesn't need to look a certain way, you don't need to be a certain way, act a certain way. It's just such a beautiful phase of life that it's almost unfortunate that we don't get to step into enough as adults, because there's so many roles that we're having to wear. We've got to be proper, we've got to act a certain way in certain situations, and it's almost like, can we not? Like,
honestly, can we not? I think that's another thing that I'm trying to do is like, can we not like conform to what society believes? Like it just, it feels so unnatural sometimes. And I think, I feel it in many ways similar to you, that I'm always kind of like trying to butt up against things that are kind of set in stone. And I'm like, well, why? Like, why does it have to be that way? And now going back to your story, from what I understand, you were, as you said, you had lots of hobbies. I think one of them was making your own clothing. And did that kind of like trigger your interest into becoming a furniture designer, which is what you initially studied at university?
Honestly, I fell into my degree because I did art at college and wanted to do something creative because it was the only thing that really interested me. Didn't even think it through to what was going to be on the other side of that degree, because most people don't. You just get funneled through the education system and you're doing things without really questioning why you're doing them. So I did furniture design. It was really fun. I got to learn woodwork, got to do welding and glass blowing and like all of these, I got to work with amazing materials, but never had a clue where it was going. And like when I look back, if I had my time again, I probably wouldn't like go to university. It was a complete waste of time. But I did learn some design skills that I still learn every day. I got my start using CAD, and I was 3D printing, and I was using Illustrator and Photoshop. So some of those skills are transferable. And then around the time that I was at university, that was also when I started making clothes. I don't even know what sparked that. I've always had an interest in clothes. And there was also a time when I was considering turning it into a business. I got like labels made and everything. And then I started actually figuring out how I was going to turn what I was making into a production line. I was like, there is no way. There is a reason why people hire people to manufacture, because you just cannot, unless you're premium and you're, creating bespoke pieces, you're just not going to. And I So that idea died before it ever came to life. But this was the startings of how I was thinking in university, where I realized that the degree that I'd done was not going to go anywhere. And I was looking to the hobbies and the interests that I had to see maybe there's something here, because I wasn't relying on university and the degree that I had. And when I left my degree, there was no jobs waiting. Like, there was no opportunities there, really. So from like my early 20s, I was looking to create those opportunities for myself.
Do you still make your own clothes?
No. I alter my clothes because I'm very small, so I have to every pair of trousers gets a few inches chopped off every single time, because they just you say they're petite, they're not petite when you're 5 foot. Like, I need a little bit of help. So I still have my sewing equipment, and it's like a hobby I'll come back to when I have more time. There's also a lot of waste involved in making clothes, and I'm kind of just like, I don't need anything, so I don't make anything. So, anything I make I'd want to use, but I'm like, I don't really need anything. So, like, I used to make yoga clothes because it was very forgiving. I could work with stretchy material, and it didn't really matter if the seams were a bit wonky, because you wouldn't tell by the time they'd stretched over my body. Then I got into tailoring, which I really, really enjoyed, and I made myself a dress for my graduation when I graduated from university. Wow. That was probably like my best piece of work, I think. Like, I had a clear vision. I made the pattern pieces, and I made a couple of drafts out of muslin, and then it was very form fitting, and it was just like a puzzle of these different pattern pieces that all slotted together, and it was very, very satisfying. But it was fun because I had a reason to make it, and I genuinely didn't have anything else that I was going to wear. Whereas now I'm more like, I don't need any clothes. I wear the same things on repeat. I have no want or need for those things. So I'm kind of just waiting for something. Like, maybe I'll make some curtains one day. I don't know.
There you go. Something will spark again. And what got you into yoga? Because, we are now talking about university times, and had you discovered yoga up to this point?
Yes, I went to one of my first classes when I was either in high school or college at the time. A friend's mum took us to like this local place, and we would go every Thursday. It was great. We loved it. Then didn't really think anything of it after that. It wasn't until I was in university, and I was in, I think, my second year of university, that I really started getting into, it was actually fitness first. It was like Pilates videos. Not that I knew that it was Pilates at the time, but that was what I was doing. And I just found this love for movement. And then the yoga videos started getting recommended to me. I was like, okay, let me try this. And then very quickly, it was almost like I became quite disciplined with it, where my day felt like it was lacking something if I hadn't done some movement. Not in a negative way. It was never like I must do this. It was always a want, and just went from there. Kind of became the thing that I would always turn to whenever I was like having a wobble or feeling unsure about what was going on with my degree or where I was going to go next. It was like, I have this thing, and then coming out of university, I got a job at a family friend's business, and then they were very good and allowed me to go to do my yoga teacher training. They allowed me. I'd only really been working there for like maybe less than 6 months, and I was like, can I please take a month off? And they were like, well, you haven't really got the holidays for it, but okay. So I went, I did my teacher training, came back. A friend that I knew at the time had a studio. She invited me to teach, and then things escalated from there. I, was doing teaching on the side along my full-time job, and then gradually I was like, I think I want to do this teaching thing a little bit more than my full-time job. And it's never been smooth sailing. It was never like, from that day on everything just went great and I was happy yoga teacher. There's been a lot of getting jobs on the side whilst I tried to figure out how I was going to support myself teaching yoga. This is why I teach yoga teachers the business side of teaching, because teaching classes alone is so difficult. You need to really plan it. You need to really think it out. But if you haven't got that awareness, or if you haven't got someone telling you or showing you that it's possible, how do you know that it is? How do you move beyond the limiting belief that you're just going to be teaching as many classes as you possibly can per month, and that's your only option as a teacher? So yeah, that is how things have progressed.
Well, I'd love to kind of look at because as you said, when you were kind of making the transition into teaching yoga, you always had this job on the side. And is that because of financial reasons that you needed to have that job on the side?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Being a yoga teacher is not a high paying job. You don't get into this because you're like, I'm going to make money. You get into this because you're like, I really enjoy teaching yoga and this brings me a lot of joy. And then when you go all in on it, it starts to get very serious. So I suppose what I was trying to do in the beginning is not make it so serious, so that I could stay in that place where it was still bringing me a lot of joy, but there wasn't that financial pressure there, because my job gave me the security. And then teaching yoga on the side was something that I was just exploring in those early years. It was just not my full-time gig.
Yes. And it's something that I actually really haven't discussed with many of my guests, is like the financial side of their careers. I think probably because it is quite taboo. One of those things that I am trying to break down, the financial side of things, because I think it is so important to talk about. And is it possible to live like a fulfilling life, a balanced life, being a yoga teacher and that is it? Or is there always a need to kind of like supplement this?
No, absolutely you can. Depends what kind of yoga teacher you are.
Okay.
Like, this is a really key point here, because when I was a yoga teacher who was just teaching in person, I was doing minimum 18 classes a week to earn a full-time wage.
Oh my gosh.
Imagine that many classes that you're showing up for. Imagine going through those motions 4 or 5 times a day. Imagine all of the people that you're seeing, all of the conversations that you're having. And as someone who's quite introverted, that was a lot for me. When I was that yoga teacher, I didn't have a fulfilling life. I wasn't practicing. I look back at photos of myself from that time and I don't look well. I was not taking care of myself. And you'd think, oh, but you're only maybe working for like 4 or 5 hours a day, but you're not, because you're driving back and forth. You're in traffic. I used to have like a stack of Tupperware on my passenger side seat, and that would be the food that I would eat that day. And I was never really eating a full meal, because I'm just snacking just to graze in between classes so that I can top up my energy levels. So that reality of a yoga teacher is not a fulfilling life. But the reality I have now, where I have, varied income from different income streams, and it's very sustainable, and I have a level of security now that I never had when I taught in person. Now my life feels very fulfilled. Doesn't mean I've got it all figured out. I'm still very much moving through different phases of my career, and I'm adapting to the different things that I want to move into. But for about 4 years now, I didn't have the same worries that I had. I had the freedom in all different aspects, that you can think freedom comes in, because that was the main thing for me. I felt like I had no freedom as a yoga teacher who just taught in person. And I remember going to a yoga teacher training many years ago, and everybody was writing down what their why was. And I just said, my why is freedom. Like, everything that I want to do right now is about freedom. And I just made my 20s, how do I build a life where I have freedom? Probably going back to how I was when I was younger, where I just hated being told what to do. I just wanted to carve a path for myself where I was the one deciding my schedule. I was the one deciding what work I did or didn't do. And yeah, So
Yeah.
yes, to answer your question, it just very much depends which way you go about it. And that's, why I work with yoga teachers now, because not many see the other way of working, what that entails, how you build that, what that's actually going to look like year in, year out, and what the expectations should be as well. Because I think people just assume like, oh, social media, I'll just post and somehow I'll make money. But like, no.
No.
It takes a while.
Yes.
We need a strategy.
Yeah, we can't just go willy-nilly. When you wrote down in your yoga teacher training, I want to find some freedom, was the concept of online yoga teaching something that had already planted a seed in your mind? Or was it just like, was your intention to be that like in-person yoga teacher? And then one day, who knows?
I think when I look back, I hadn't thought much about online at this point. I think I may have started a YouTube channel and posted some very awkward videos and then just been like, oh, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
But funnily enough, during that training, COVID happened. The world started going into lockdown. I was on an island at the time. I had to evacuate the island, go back home to England. We went straight into lockdown. It was like...
Oh my
complete
gosh.
contrast from like this bubble that I'd been in on this yoga teacher training to the world is ending, basically.
Yeah.
Because of that, it quickly shifted me into in-person isn't an option anymore. I have to go online. But at that time, because I hadn't really got much of a foundation online, I had an Instagram page that I've been posting on, but it's very different, the skill set to just post from your phone than setting up a camera, understanding video production, audio, understanding how to create a great online experience. Like there's so many skills that I had to acquire before I was really ready to go online. So COVID was very much that for me. It was like, I need to educate myself in a way that I haven't before. I need to understand what are different business models online? What are they going to look like? And then which ones of those align with my goal of freedom, because you can create something, but it can just create more chaos and it's not really going to get you close to your goal. Or if you understand what something really looks like, not just right now, but further down the line, you can create the lifestyle that you're really looking for. So, yeah.
Goodness. So where do I want to go from here? I think I really want to like magnify kind of like the beginnings of your YouTube channel, because would you say that is kind of the start of your career, kind of like that sort of area, or do you think it started before?
No, I think Instagram was my start, but YouTube is what I'm most known for. Like YouTube elevated me in a way that no other platform has. But Instagram was where I've been from a very like young age, from my early days when my practice first started. I was documenting my practice. Never thought about it becoming a business or leveraging that audience in any way. It was very much just innocent and just about community. And then during COVID, because I didn't have the YouTube audience, I had an Instagram audience, I created my first program and I sold that primarily through Instagram, through my newsletter. It was never YouTube that I was using, and it wasn't until, where are we, maybe like 2022, 2023, that YouTube genuinely started to be something that was working for me. It was a very slow road to progress. YouTube was probably from like 2019 till, probably about 2023, where I was like, this is now what people know me for, rather than Instagram. Like people go, oh yeah, I do YouTube classes. Not, oh yeah, I've seen you on Instagram.
Interesting. And how did that feel, like making the transition to this kind of longer format?
Oh, so jarring in the beginning. I remember YouTube pickled me. I was like, I don't understand this program. I don't understand this platform.
Yes.
I'm coming from Instagram where it's pictures, it's highlight reels. I don't know how to create a long video. And I was so camera shy. Like I keep those videos. They're still available for anyone to go and watch, because I often will like send clients to to it and I'll be like, you think you are camera shy? Just go and watch that girl, because she was really like not comfortable at all. And it's so like a reminder to myself as well, from like, as like, you know, it is possible when you look back at how far you've come. You could go from being that awkward to being fairly competent and confident on camera. But it took me 4 years, you know? And now I'd say I could just turn on the camera and I'm pretty much good to go now. You just turn it on because you've rehearsed it. You know, I have over 1,000 classes now, so of course I'm going to feel comfortable. But in those early years, I was not. I think potentially it was an age thing as well. Maybe it was self-confidence, self-awareness, you know. I was probably overthinking it a lot as well, because I am that person who cares deeply and considers so many things. I probably think myself into situations that don't even exist, and that was definitely holding me back. Like, I was the limiting factor in so much of my growth, and I just needed all of those years of slow progress to signal to myself that I was good at what I was doing and I was getting somewhere. And I think once you start seeing that, you start getting a little bit of traction, it gives you so much confidence to keep going. In the early days, it's very difficult as a yoga teacher on YouTube, where you're just one of thousands and it feels like you're posting into the void and no one's seeing it. And you can be the most talented teacher, but because you're just not showing up in search, or you're not being recommended to people, or perhaps you're just not as consistent in your content output, you're not gonna get the same result as other teachers who may not be as experienced or seasoned as a teacher, but they've got the other skills down, and therefore they're excelling on YouTube. You know, it's a difficult one.
It really is. And I think that's probably where I am faulting, is the YouTube presence and like the consistency of that. And, you know, when you started, would you say consistency has always been like priority, top of mind, or has it kind of ebbed and flowed to the point where now you are very consistent in your posting?
Yes, there's been times when I've needed a reprieve, where I've needed to go away and sort of self-evaluate and take a bit of time out. But will say I have been consistent for years and years and years. What that consistency looked like has been different year to year. You know, consistency back then might have been like I'm posting a couple times a week, but that was consistency. You know, consistency now looks a little bit different with a team of people helping me. You know, obviously you're able to increase your output. But I'm also, I would say, like, experienced enough in the content game to know that that's okay, because there are brilliant creators out there who literally post once a month. And as soon as they post, I get that notification. I'm one of the first people watching, because they have mastered the game of like less is more, but let me just make this piece of content, whatever it is, like really, really excellent.
Yes.
There's lots of different ways that you can be consistent. You know, it doesn't look the same for every single person. And, you know, I'm always reevaluating that to be like, is this what consistency needs to look like right now?
Yeah, kind of coming back to that idea of, does this fit my lifestyle right now? And going back to, you know, the beginning of your business, in terms of like the financial side, at what point were you able to completely support yourself with your own business?
I mean, there's been different chapters. So when I was teaching in person, I was also doing some freelance marketing work on the side. I was teaching classes, and then a couple times a month I would do a workshop or I would do an event to add additional income, and I was doing freelance marketing on the side. So that combined meant that I was supporting myself really well. You know, and I did that up until COVID. Then COVID happened, and I think everybody had that moment of like evaluating what mattered to them. So I dropped the freelance marketing. I was no longer teaching in person. So then I went into this big dip where I had barely any income. Like I think I had a couple of online clients, one-to-one, and I was really just coming up with whatever I could just to get through. I was living with my parents at the time, you know, tried to really live below my means as much as possible. I went back to working full time after that. I got a job in e-commerce.
Oh, wow.
And this is where, like, you know, the consistency has looked a bit different, because at that time I had to prioritize my mental health. I had to prioritize showing up for this job, because that gave me the security that I really needed after a time when I'd been in a dip and there was no security. And I just thought, how do I take away that like pressure of that like constant mental fatigue where I'm trying to figure everything out? And I just thought, let's just get my needs met, my basic needs met. And then when I'm feeling good again, I can start building myself back up and I can start reassessing where I go from here. And this is why I say there's been different chapters where I've been able to support myself. I haven't, and then I have. And then it was when I was working at my dad's business, actually, just before my YouTube channel like really took off. And when I say took off, I mean in terms of like revenue, where I was able to be like, this is now earning me more than my full-time job. And I let this run for a few months, and, you know, I was speaking to my dad about it, and he was like, you cannot work for me anymore. You need to go and, you know, run with this and make this your own. So that was the real turning point, where I would say ever since then, the business has been in a very good place. You know, cash flow has been consistent. There's been no worries there. And I've been able to make decisions, hire people. I've been able to, like, you know, really build on top of that, because I had that stable income, where in previous years it was a little bit sporadic and you can't really make decisions. You know, you can't forecast anything if you don't know what you're expecting to be making month in, month out. So that's why I say, yeah, YouTube was a real thing for me that changed everything.
I appreciate you giving us the details of that, because I think
you've got to talk about it, because, you know, if people don't realize that, they just think, oh, it's all right for you. You've got this now. No, I've been there taking jobs, you know, just literally trying to figure out which subscriptions I needed to cancel to try and save myself more money, because I used to think like that. I used to think, how can I save myself more money rather than how can I make more money? That was like a very big switch for me, because when you are in that situation where you're just scrambling to make whatever you can, there is scarcity there. So of course you're going to think, what can I take away that's going to make my situation easier, rather than what can I build that's going to make, you know, life easier, so that those expenses aren't as much of an issue for me. And, you know, unless you hear stories like that, you don't realize that that is a very logical way of thinking. You know, the scarcity, you're just trying to protect yourself. But then if you're not thinking about how there is a possibility for an abundance, then, you know, you'll always be pulled back into, oh no, what can I cancel? What can I stop paying for to try and, you know, keep myself at that level? Yes.
I think I am in that mindset at the moment of scarcity, because it's like there's been so many transitions recently, you know, moving back to another country and moving back with my parents, and then just trying to like rebuild that like savings pot is proving to be challenging. But perhaps I should look at it in a way of like, how, rather than saving more money, like how can I make more money for myself? And I think the thing that I always come up against is, you know, legitimacy, and, well, why would anyone, you know, want to pay me for my services, or, you know, trust me with these certain things. And I suppose that brings me to my next question, where in lockdown, you were kind of creating these programs for your Instagram followers. Did you ever kind of come up against those like limiting beliefs that, like, what if no one purchases this thing that I create? What if no one wants what I have to offer?
Absolutely. And I still come up against those thoughts daily, even though you've got years of data that proves to you that you can sell something that people want, that you can create something that solves genuine problems. You still doubt yourself, because the expectations get higher. You know, what people see you putting out into the world is expected to be better, because people assume, oh, you know, you've got years of experience. But just going back to what you were saying about how you think, who am I to share this, to create something that people will want to pay for? Those are all the kinds of conversations that I had with myself, sometimes still have with myself, have with yoga teachers on a daily basis, because, and I also see it in a lot of women as well. I think we are, there's almost like this conservatism where you're just not that bold or that brazen enough to go and put something out into the world and to be like, this is worth this. Like, I see guys do it all the time. They just stick a price tag on something and I'm like, that's so bold. How bold of you to, like, how are you backing this up? Where's your credentials, Whereas I feel like women are a lot more like, I need to prove myself to feel like I can justify this price tag. And I definitely had that when I was creating those early programs. I remember people saying to me, you're charging too little. I feel like this is worth a lot more. And I had to really work around that, like within myself, where I was like, where is that place where I feel like it's fair to the customer, but it's fair to me? Like, I haven't sort of, how do I want to frame this? Sometimes I think with price, it's very interesting because people will assume that something is not good if it's priced really low. They start to think, well, what's wrong with it? And
I see.
What I realized I'd done is I'd kind of diminished the value of what I was offering by offering it so low, because I didn't want to put a high price tag on something, because I was like, who am I to charge you? And it wasn't even a lot. It was going to be like £40. I was like, who am I to charge you £40? Let me just charge you 20. And it was
I'll give it to you for free.
I know. And now I'm just like, that was absurd. But if I hadn't have gone through that, I wouldn't be able to coach other people through that. And I wouldn't be able to say, what you're experiencing right now is so valid. And here's how we work around this. What would need to be true for you to put a more realistic figure on this offering? What do you need to feel like this thing is doing for you to be okay with charging this amount for it? Because I feel like it's ultimately that. It's like, I remember I used to just add more and more value to my programs. I'd just be like, let me add another habit tracker, let me add another practice plan and this and that, because that will justify the cost. But what I realize is that people don't want more of something. People actually just want to get to their goal, to get to the transformation, whatever it is, to solve the problem in the shortest amount of time, in the simplest amount of steps, the easiest way possible. And if you can package it like that, and if you can say to someone like, I am not going to sell you 60 videos because I actually only need to teach you this in 10. I find a lot of people will be like, well, thank you for saving my time. And they'll be like, well, actually, yeah, obviously you make those 10 videos substantial.
Yes.
Comprehensive. But
yes.
I find most people will be like, actually, yeah, that was worth paying for. I could understand the value in that. But yeah, I hope that helps.
No, it definitely does. And I think what you said about the whole like women versus men thing is so beyond relevant. It's funny, I find that I'm very bold when it comes to getting guests on the podcast and like really just like putting myself out there. And I will say this is all, behind the curtains of email. So who knows what I'd be like in person. I think I would still be bold, but like perhaps not quite as bold as sending multiple emails. But anyways, but when it comes to like trying to package myself as something that could make money, I find it very hard to do. I have this conversation with my father a lot of like, what does my future hold? And I really do want this to become my future, but I find it very difficult for me to look at it in terms of a business. I'm all about like the creative side of things, and I find trying to like put my brain in the perspective of like, oh, how could this make money? Like boggles my mind. Like I just feel so lost in that sense. And the whole podcast inspiration is because I was very much like you. I had unfortunately gone down the path of becoming a teacher because I had never thought that there was ever anything else for me to experience. My parents, I adore them. They're wonderful people, but the things that they value is security. And that is something that I have been very grateful to grow up with, like a sense of absolute stability. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that that's what I had to strive for as well. But it's like, I would love to build something for myself that will one day be stable, but it's like that transition from the creative side of things to actually building something that is worthwhile and can stand on its own 2 feet. Mm-hmm. That's my struggle at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel you. I relate to wanting to just be the creative person, director, making those kinds of decisions and not wanting it to be like, how do I think about this in terms of operations and in terms of revenue and all of these things that are just
disgusting.
I don't want to think about those.
No.
I just want to be with my camera and in a nice location making nice
floating
yoga
around.
videos. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't I just be like that? But
yeah.
No. But no, you'll find your way.
Yeah, I will eventually. And I suppose that will bring me to my next question, which is one of the things about your content. Like you said, you've done over 1,000 videos, which is actually truly mind-boggling, is the beautiful locations that you bring us to. So what was your kind of like inspiration behind that? A lot of yoga teachers kind of just have their studio, but why did you want to take us to all these different places?
A couple of things. One of my early influences, still an influence, is Boho Beautiful's channel. I just always thought their production and the locations and the whole experience was just so beautiful. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to do what they were doing in a different way. They do a lot of voiceovers. You don't hear the natural sounds. You're there, but you're not fully there. And I suppose I wanted to create these experiences where I take you there. You hear the sounds of the birds, maybe there's a lawnmower, maybe there's a dog barking. It's never going to be perfect, but you're there with me. You are going to hear the rustle of the leaves or maybe even a little bit of wind in my microphone. But, there's not going to be music. There's going to be that level of presence where it is like you are joining me. And I just couldn't get that in a studio setting. I remember for years, and we were speaking about this at the beginning, about how I have turned so many rooms in the house into studio spaces and tried to make things work. And for the first few years on YouTube, I was using the box room in my parents' house, and it was just awful. The sound was awful. It was a white wall, but it was never quite white because some days it would be overcast and then it would look blue, and then some days it would be sunny and then it would look yellow, and it was just never how I wanted it to be. There was barely enough space for me to even fit my yoga mat, and I just remember always feeling so confined in this space. Mm-hmm. Then, I started going to some studios, and I was like, well, if I'm paying this for a day rate at a studio, why am I choosing to be in a studio in Manchester or in Warwickshire, where I can go and probably hire an Airbnb or something where I can stay the night, so I can have a much more relaxed experience rather than a chaotic 5 hours of quickly chucking everything up to try and set the shot, filming as many yoga classes as I can, and then taking it all down. It was just, that was my life for the first few years of YouTube. So I just thought, how can I make this experience better? Also to justify the cost, so that, if that's costing me that and I'm only getting this many hours in a studio, but I could take that amount of money and go here with it, and then have a much more relaxed time, full use of the space, maybe be able to stay 1 or 2 days, then obviously that makes more sense. Plus I'm going to get the weather, plus I'm going to get the environment, plus I'm going to get all of the things that the studio didn't have. And I felt like I wanted to maybe just do things a little bit different. Like that's what kept it exciting for me. It's never the same location. Like I don't think I've actually gone back to the same location. No, I don't think I have at all. In the like however many years I've been going to locations now on various filming trips. But for me, I think when you're doing something like YouTube and you're doing something where it can feel like you're going through the motions the same every single time, you know, it's going to be a yoga class, it's going to be a mat laid out, 2 camera angles, it's all very similar. It can start to feel a little bit monotonous, like it really can after a few years. And I just thought, how can I keep that spark going where this feels exciting for me, where I am genuinely overjoyed to be in this position sharing this. I had to find a way to create that every single time. So that is why sometimes I will go to the woods with my camping trolley and all of my filming equipment in my camping trolley so I could go and find a very awkward but beautiful spot to film a class in, because that's how I keep the spark alive. And that makes me genuinely excited to share, because I'm like, guys, we're in the woods, you know, there's birds and it's beautiful and there's dappled sunlight, and no studio could ever give me that. No room at home, like this is my studio at home, it can't give me that. So that is why I choose to do the difficult thing, which is to do locations and deal with all of the interruptions and all of the uncontrollables. But it's to keep the joy alive so I can keep showing up.
I absolutely love that. And I think the thing you mentioned about keeping the joy alive, like it's so true. I followed programs like your current programs and then programs from, you know, years ago, and the joy is still consistent in what you produce. And I think it's like a calming sense. And I'm sure people have commented on this before about you, but you just have a very calming way about yourself, and you seem very sure in what you're doing. And I think that is something that's really beautiful that comes through. And I also really like that you never like make a comment to where you are. It's kind of like, it's just like this like fun little surprise that kind of adds something to the video. Like the focus is always on the yoga. It's always on, like you said, being concise, being clear, being purposeful about what you're sharing. And then there's just this beautiful backdrop that kind of like complements the whole thing. And we only have a little bit more time, but I have so many more questions. So very quickly, where have you filmed to date?
So just this year,
yes,
I was in California. I went to Poland for a little bit, and then I went to Sierra Nevada.
Wow.
I took a couple other trips, but they weren't really filming. Last year we did Greece, we did Italy, we did Spain, we did Tenerife. Where else did I do? I did Spain a lot last year. I love Spain. I have an ongoing love affair with that country. I just can't get enough of it. I just keep going back every year. I've done Hungary. I've done Portugal. Mainly Europe, because it's so accessible to me being from the UK. It's 2 hours on a flight. Like the California trip that I did earlier this year was epic. Like Joshua Tree was just incredible, but the 24 hours of traveling, the jet lag, like I was waking up at 2 a.m, just like, what do I do with myself? I can't film, it's dark. I remember one morning having like 2 coffees before it was even like 4 a.m, and I was just sat there buzzing, like, let's go, give me the sunrise, like, let's go. And
that's hilarious.
So yeah, that's why I don't really do the long haul, but those trips are really special. I'd love to do more of those. It's like a love-hate relationship with the trips, because again, you know, people expect you to have very high morals when you are not just a yoga teacher, but where you are an internet person. And I will get comments from people sometimes where they will say, do you have to travel so much? Can you be more considerate about your travel, like consumption? So during the summer, I try and not travel during the summer. I try and utilize the countryside that I have in the UK, just keep the travel to a minimum, because I don't want to be that person that's flying around everywhere. You know, I'm very privileged to be able to do that, but also it does beg the question, like, is that necessary to do for what you're doing? And, we're talking about how, the comments and the things that people hold you to and the expectations that people have. This is also a side of it that I'm getting where I'm like, this is the experience that you guys love. But then I'm also getting comments from some of you who are saying, but do you have to travel? But like, I live in England. It's cold. It is wet. It is not, optimal for filming outdoors. I have a very small window of the year where I can do this. And as a business, as someone who's creating content constantly, I have to work around that. So yeah, just a little bit more than what you asked.
That's interesting that you received that comment, actually. I'm kind of surprised by that. And your love of Spain. You're learning Spanish. And from what I know, your hope is to one day be teaching classes in Spanish. So what kind of lit that fire in you to do that next thing?
My first yoga teacher training was in Spain. Okay. And then I went back and I volunteered at the center that I trained at for 3 months. And I remember at the time a few people were speaking Spanish, and I kind of wanted to participate a little bit, and genuinely thought that I knew a lot because I'd been using Duolingo for a few months, and I was like, look at me. And then I tried to say the most basic things, and I realized, if you're going to learn a language, you actually need to learn. You can't just pick up a few words. You need to understand how to conjugate, etc. And then last year I started taking it more seriously because it just really excited me. It was like this opportunity where people open up to you when you make the effort to speak to them in their language. This country opened up to me. I am so much more confident to go and travel around Spain because I know if I'm in Andalusia somewhere, I can just go and ask, a question, or I can try and get by as much as I can. And those little experiences fill you with so much confidence and joy. And it's just that sense of wow, because I was never the person who was good with languages. I hated French. I hated German at school. I was always just ugh, I don't want to do this, because I never had the incentive to do it for myself. Whereas when I started traveling and when I started speaking to people at the retreat center that I was volunteering at, I was like, there's a genuine need and want for me to learn this. So I think it's funny, isn't it, how you're never incentivized to learn something when someone else is telling you, but when you can find your own meaning or, create your own motivations, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, now I want to do that thing. Not because you told me to, but because I decided I wanted it for myself.
1,000,000%. It's like when someone wants you to do it, it's like you run the opposite direction. And then finally it's like, oh, wait, this could actually be fun for me. Well, that's incredible. I do not speak Spanish, but I think that'd be a very interesting, an amazing thing for you to kind of produce, because I know it is I worked in a bilingual Spanish school for a little while, and it's such a beautiful language, and it's something that I have not had the passion yet to explore another language, but I kind of wish that I just grew up knowing one, why didn't my parents know another language?
For sure.
Yeah.
I feel like if I ever had kids with someone and they had another language, I'd be like, right, we're doing this from day dot. You only speak to them in your language. I only speak to them in my language. They're going to grow up bilingual whether they want it or not. But then they're going to get older and be like, now I have this superpower. And I'm not going to have to try as hard as everybody else who's trying to learn as an adult.
Oh, God. It's actually painful. And where would I like to go now with our conversation? I suppose because you are very prolific in your creation, and I feel like there's always a new program out, and just you're constantly producing this content. What is kind of your structure in terms of actually creating content?
So for short form, I have a content system. It's something that I had was working with like unofficially. Now it is something that I've created like a whole system around, because I was like, actually maybe this is genius, and now I'm going to package this up, and now we're launching this month for yoga teachers, who anyone else who wants to have more of a production line around their content that's short form. So I'm always collecting ideas. Those ideas are informing what is going into the content workflow for that week. That then dictates everything that gets filmed, everything that goes to the editors, everything that goes through operations to be scheduled, etc. So that's kind of like a well-oiled machine now. Then with long form, every like 2 months, I'd say, I go on a big filming trip, and then I will film as many classes as is needed for that time. And I typically base it on like the classes that I know are the ones that people always love, and then there's always going to be those more experimental ones. So it's about 80% of like the tried and tested like top performers, and then it's about 20% of the experimental, like let's just see, because I think you need that, otherwise it just starts to be very samey and expected. So that's like not day to day, like month to month, I guess. And then we always have the bigger things in the year. So there's always going to be like a 30-day challenge in January. And people will say to me like, can we have another challenge? And I'm like, guys, you do not understand. It takes me like 5 months to do this challenge, because I've got to plan it. I've got to go film it. It's got to go to the editors. It's got to be scheduled. It's got to be promoted, like all of that in itself. And then, this is just one very small part of like everything that I'm doing. So I always have to try and say to people like, please just be happy with your one challenge a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, but because I have these benchmarks throughout the year where I know this gets done here, and, experience has taught me, it maybe looks like it just runs. Sometimes it is a little bit chaotic, but there's always that understanding of what needs to happen when, and I think that makes it more consistent.
I suppose like one of my last questions, and it's a little bit of a selfish question, but I am genuinely curious, and I think I'm kind of doing like this like tips thing for how to create a podcast, and I've been thinking about like future tips, and it's like you need to be so persistent. And I was going through everyone that I've reached out to come on the podcast. You will be, I think, my 50th guest that I've interviewed, and I have probably emailed and reached out to 200, 300 people, maybe more. And the majority of people don't respond. So I would really love to know, because it's actually funny, when I finally got the message back from you, it didn't click who you were, because I had messaged someone else, and then I saw your email and I was like, oh my God, it's her. And I was like, this is the best day of my life. I cannot believe I'm going to be speaking to this woman who is literally a part of my everyday life. Like, I was so just like, I texted my boyfriend or my partner right away, and I was like, guess who answered me? Anyways, so my question is, because I am a very small creator, and I acknowledge that, I've made nothing in terms of financial income at this point. Why did you say yes to me?
You know what it was? Your approach was very personal. And by that, I meant I felt like I was speaking to a real person, rather than it being this template where someone had just swapped out like topic and context, and it was just like a very generic email. Because I get asked to go on these podcasts quite a lot. I say no, like you're probably like maybe like the 4th or 5th podcast I've ever been on in the years of like me getting asked to go on podcasts, because they always just feel very disconnected, where it's somebody's manager has contacted me and I'm like, this person doesn't know who I am. You probably don't know who I am. I know that I'm like one of 1,000, and maybe like selfishly you kind of just want someone to stroke your ego a little bit and just be like, I know who you are and I'd really appreciate a conversation with you. Because that's the thing with podcasts, like it's nice to be asked, but when you just feel like the person doesn't actually really know who you are, and there's kind of like that space between you, it's like, well, I don't know whether I want to sit down and have a conversation with you. So I think, I even said to my friend, I was like, I just really liked how normal you were and how like not
am I normal?
Official,
I don't know.
not like, you know, not like corporate, not it wasn't like this standard script, yeah. So I recommend that you don't lose that touch, because, you know, if those are your like, if we could say that's like your conversion rate, that's a pretty high conversion rate, I feel like. You know, because I imagine there's whole teams of people in like the big podcast world where they are literally just sending emails every day just to see who bites. And they probably have much lower conversion rates than you.
There's definitely been times when I have fallen into the trap of like, oh, let me just send off, you know, 50 emails today and like hope someone bites. But the people that I have had on the podcast are people that I have genuinely wanted to speak to so passionately, and I've actually taken the time to like you said, write down something that means something to them, because at the end of the day, what I am asking people to give me is their time, and that is such a precious resource, and I really want it to be worthwhile for people. So I'm always trying to like picture it in a way of like, this is an opportunity for you to like reflect on your life and to learn things about yourself, because I know that's all I can offer my guests at this time is like, I can give you the space where you can just completely be yourself and have like 100% attention on you. And I'm pleased to know, selfishly, I'm like, oh yay, I'm glad I somehow got you to feel that way. So yeah.
Yeah, you absolutely did. And I think something I've learned is that if your intention can be felt by the other person, it will be received well. You know, like I can always tell when I get the generic emails, like, you know, I was going through my DMs earlier and I was just like, you haven't got a clue who I am. Like, and it shows so much in the way that you're messaging, and don't think that people don't pick up on that, because they do. Especially when you're getting, you know, a lot of messages. So you've seen them. I know the email headlines. I know the, you know, the filler in the blank templates. So yeah.
Well, amazing. We have nearly finished up our conversation. And I suppose I will end with a very common question, but what do you hope your future to hold in terms of, you know, if you'd like to go into the personal side, if you'd like to stick it with business, what do you see the next little while to look like?
Simplicity is the main objective for me at this point. I don't want more complexity. You know, I'm not interested in being bigger. Like the numbers like that don't concern me. What I really want is to continue making an impact, but in a way that is simple, so that I'm not chasing my tail constantly. Like that's a really big thing, because I don't know where my life's gonna go. Sometimes I joke when the business gets really difficult, and I'll say like, just sign me up to be a trad wife, because I'm tired and I don't want to make any more decisions. Like I will say, I'm like, can I just be like a traditional mom and like stay at home? And like, I will take that life right now because I'm tired. And that is why I say simplicity, because, you know, like turning 30, I'm changing, and I'm realizing that like, I'm not always going to have this drive. I'm not always going to be this ambitious. So why am I going to build a business that assumes that I'm always going to be able to perform at this level? Because I'm not. So now I'm building a business that gives me the freedom, like going back to my previous goal, to have kids or, you know, move into a different stage of my life where it might be able to just run just a little bit differently without me, or just alongside me. So simplicity.
That is beautiful. And it's funny you say, you know, I had someone else come on the podcast quite a while ago. If you'd like to listen to the podcast, it was with Judah Armani. I can link it below. But he said that the marker of like a good business, a successful business, is that you can walk away and it's still going to run. And it's interesting that you say that, because, you know, this business is you, but it's so true. And I think I forget that life is going to change. Like, even when my partner comes home, like, I'm going to have to prioritize that connection with him. Like, I can't just be absorbed to my computer for 5 hours every night. So it's about like creating that foundation that I think you have done so beautifully. Like, I think you have really, truly, I really look up to you. And after this conversation, I just feel like that is even stronger. And despite our businesses being very vastly different, I really think that you have something really beautiful to offer. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Hannah. I've really, really enjoyed this conversation. And I feel like I'm so glad that I said yes, because I knew from your first message that it was going to be exactly like this. So yeah, thank you for making me feel so comfortable and so welcome.
Well, thank you so much to my lovely guests, not guests, my lovely listeners. Everything is linked below. Please do go check out Charlie's videos. They, honestly, just it'll make your day. So just go do a yoga video, no matter where you are. Well, I guess it depends where you are. But anyways, just go do a yoga video. And give her a follow. Check out her programs. They will all be linked below. And I will see you all next Tuesday. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And yeah, bye.
Why is this so hard? Be a functioning